Hi everyone. I am so pumped for this. I'm just so pumped for this. I actually am set up in my office, um, in a really random spot, but it's the only place I could find that I could be comfortable while I sit here for the next half an hour and chat to you. And it's a bit of a makeshift situation at the moment, but we're hoping to get a little bit more involved as this goes along. But this is the official first episode for the Pod Plays podcast, which this has honestly been such a dream for me to do just because I see a gap in this space so heavily when it comes to the parent journey, raising deaf and hard of hearing kids, and just the information out there is so conflicting and it's so overwhelming and it's saturated with so much stuff. And sometimes it can just feel like we are running around in circles or that we're on the hamster wheel and there just doesn't seem to be a way to get off. So I wanted to fill that gap and really start to connect parents with each other and start to share and amplify the stories and experiences that we're all having because there are so many overlaps. There are so many moments of connection that we are having as a collective on this journey. And so sometimes it's nice to actually know you're not alone, know that what you're going through isn't just you, because it can be so isolating on this journey when we are the only ones, maybe in our friendship group or in our family, on this very unique path. And as much as our wonderful support system in our life and everyone involved in that is just beautiful and wants to do everything they can to support us, it is a real case of, if you're not going through it, you can't fully understand what that experience is like. And so I sort of see this podcast as just an opportunity to share everything that's going on with all of us and have it in a place where we can seek comfort and really gain insight into the journeys of others and know that we're such a huge part of this bigger community, and how lucky we are and how privileged we are to be raising these beautiful little humans who are all going to blow up the world with their brilliance at some point. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And I thought for our first ever episode, I put an EOI out on my Instagram recently around anyone who was keen to be interviewed by me and to share their story. And man, did I have the most overwhelming response in such a good way. So many parents wanting to share their story because there is such power in sharing our stories. And I think for a lot of us, there can sometimes be a process of healing in sharing that story, beyond your own world, and amplifying that and speaking out loud things that are really, I guess sometimes we suppress on this journey because they're too much. And so it can be, yeah, I could just see that in just the people who came forward, how much they want to be a part of this. And that just makes me so excited because it means that this is right. And we are creating a space that is needed. And that's really, 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 really exciting. Anyway, for the first episode, I thought that I would start with my story and a little bit about who I am, as an intro, because I think that's important to know who is running this thing. And I guess my journey is very unique. If you haven't been following along on my socials or know much about me, it is quite a unique story. And I think it's worth sharing at the start so everyone sort of knows, I guess, the lens and perspective I'm coming from here. So, without further ado, let's get cracking. As mentioned in the intro, my name is Clare Best, and I am teacher of the deaf. I've been working in the bilingual deaf education space for close to 15 years now. And yeah, it's been, oh wow, a whirlwind of a journey. I just recently got back from a conference in Sydney for educators of the deaf, and I just had a lot of these like moments of thinking back over my career and just the amount of trainings I've been to and the amount of professional development I've done and the amount of deaf and hard of hearing kids I've actually worked with and taught, and been a part of their lives, and it just seems so crazy that it's been 15 years, but it has. And so that in itself was a huge journey for me, but there was a bit of a twist of fate that happened 3.5 years ago, and that's sort of where my story really gets interesting, is that I was currently at the time, sorry, not currently now, I was at the time head of the department for deaf and hard of hearing space at my school, which was down on the Gold Coast. That's where I'm based in Australia. And I was pregnant with my second beautiful baby. And I actually went on maternity leave a little bit early and really started thinking about what I wanted to do with my life. And I remember thinking, wow, there was a lot going on in that space for me at the time in that career, and I just wasn't sure whether it was where I wanted to be long term. And it was a really tricky time for me, and I felt so conflicted in what I wanted to do. So I thought maternity leave would be the perfect opportunity to sort of reflect and get my headspace right for what I wanted to do once Bub came along and I was ready to return to work. But that all sort of got blown up on when my beautiful little boy, Frank, who is my second son, was born in 2021. He had his newborn hearing screen, the first one, a couple of days after birth, and it was inconclusive. And at the time, obviously, doing what I did for work, knowing what I knew, there was no way. My brain was just not even in that headspace. I could not even fathom it. And not because it was a scary, terrifying thing for me, but it just didn't even enter my brain space, like at all. And so, yeah, that was really interesting when that happened. And then a couple of days later, as a lot of you would know, I had another screening, and again inconclusive. So we came back the following week, again inconclusive, and we were referred to the hospital for formal audiological testing, which was a long day for anyone who's done that test. It's the ABR. It's, oh my goodness, it is. It's all about getting, I guess, testing a response in the auditory brain stem to see if there is a response to sound at the brain level. So it was a long day holding a beautiful, 7-week baby in this little clinic in this little room for 4 to 5 hours, and I was exhausted. And we had to do that over 2 days. And at the end of the second day, the audiologist turned to me and showed me Frank's audiogram. And I, again, was in such a state of just not even in that world that when it happened, when she showed me it, I just looked at her and said, "Oh, what's that?" And she's like, "That's your son's audiogram." And I said, no, it's not. And she goes, yes, it is. And I said, well, that would mean that he's deaf. And she's like, yes, he is deaf. And I still remember looking at her, and we've been having conversations the whole way through in this appointment about me being a teacher for the deaf and how funny would it be if I had a deaf kid, like totally just, just off the cuff stuff that I just never thought would happen. And then she's sitting there staring at me, and I didn't have any words. And I remember straight away, classic Clare, just lightening the mood and going, "Oh well, I'm the best person for the job," making all these comments, while internally feeling more emotion than I could possibly handle. And I remember her looking at me and saying, "It's okay not to be okay." And I thought, what is she talking about? I'm fine. This is fine. I know what I need to do. It's all going to be great. And I'm like, I know. She goes, I probably wouldn't drive. And I thought at the time that was such a crazy thing to say, because I'm like, I am fine. This is all good. Keeping in mind, I didn't mention my husband didn't come to the appointment because I had convinced him that it wasn't worth it and that it was going to be a long day and it would result in nothing. So I was there on my own, 7 weeks postpartum, already so hormonal, and holding this beautiful little bub and just going, oh my gosh, what? And so then after that, got all the paperwork, got all the brochures, and left and went to go breastfeed Frankie in the room that they have allocated there at the hospital. And I'm sitting down and I'm fine. So I might just call my husband and just let him know. And as I called him, it was like all the emotion that I'd just been suppressing and feeling all came out, and I could not even get the words out. It was just complete, like unintelligible. My husband was like, "What is going on? What's happening?" And I finally got out. I said, "He's deaf. Frank is deaf." And he was like, "What do you mean?" And I'm like, "He's deaf." And the more I said it, the more I just couldn't, my whole body, even now I get goosebumps thinking about it, but my whole body was just in, I don't even know, shock is the best way to describe it. And over the next couple of weeks, me and my husband went through the same phases as everyone else. There was obviously this real element of, can this actually be happening because of what I did for work and how ironic and serendipitous it seemed. I just felt like it was a big mistake, like they must have got it wrong. And so definitely went through all those same feelings, grief, definitely grief. And I make it really clear with this when I talk about grief. Because obviously prior to this, just to give some context, I was already in the community quite actively. I have many deaf friends. I'm fluent in Australian Sign Language. I'm so much a part of that world already that the grief wasn't about my son being deaf at all. In fact, I might have been a little bit excited about that. My grief stemmed from the fact that I knew he had just been born into a world that wasn't designed for him, and that he was going to have to fight for his basic human rights. And that is where my grief came from, that feeling of this isn't an easy path for him. And that makes me so angry. And I just felt so much emotion in that time, because I just thought, I was on this side of going, oh my goodness, I have a deaf child. I get to raise a deaf child. That is so beautiful and in so many ways and such a gift. But oh man, like I've seen my students go through what they've been through. I've seen my friends go through what they've had to go through, my deaf friends. And I just didn't want that for him. I didn't want him to feel ever that he wasn't accepted or included, or that he wasn't worthy. And that just snowballed. That hit me so hard. So hard. And so over time, there was a lot of tears in the shower and a lot of conversations and a lot of what ifs and a lot of everything. But then we went through the same processes a lot of us go through. And I obviously, before we even found out he was deaf, I was signing to him. I'd signed to my eldest boy, Billy, from birth. So it was just a natural thing for me to do, given I knew how beneficial sign languages were for children in general. So for me, it was just, all right, here we go. Off we go. So I just started signing with him, and I'm just unpacking his world as explicitly as I could in any avenue or any way I could. Didn't have to be perfect, but I just wanted to throw as much language at him as early as I could. Even after he got his hearing aids, because as we know, devices just aren't a fix. They aren't a cure for anything. They are a tool. That's what they're there for. They're a tool to support auditory input, but they're so influenced by so many other factors in regards to how well they work and the outcomes for kids. So it was just a non-negotiable that we would be signing to our boy, and that Auslan would become a family language for us. And I always like to word it that way, instead of saying, we all started signing for my deaf son. It was more that Auslan is now a family language. We are a bilingual family. We use 2 languages now, and that is it. And from now on, that will be it. So it sort of just became that philosophy for us. And over the next couple of years, we just went through many, many ups and downs. So Frank was born moderately severe. So his levels were moderately severe bilaterally, sensory neural, but almost a couple of months after birth, we started getting a conductive component coming into play, and like constant fluid. I'm talking, we could not budget no matter what we did. He had 4 sets of grommets over the space of about 2 years, just constant recurrent ear infections, fluid, blocked ear canals, like middle ear was eustachian tube dysfunction, like everything you could think of going on in that middle ear was happening. And therefore, the hearing aids were not doing what they needed to, or they couldn't work the way they needed to because the sound couldn't travel through the ear canal, through that middle ear to the inner ear to provide sound. So our little boy, Frankie, wasn't getting the input he required to develop speech. But also, something that's not talked about enough with these conductive overlays is that it's just such a wait and see approach with professionals. There's not this urgency that you get with sensory neural. And I really don't agree with that. And I think since going through this with Frank, I really am passionate about educating family on conductive overlays and conductive hearing loss on top of the sensory neural, because it creates this mixed hearing loss that actually has a number of factors and causes such a reduction in auditory input in some circumstances. And for Frank, that was quite a significant drop for him. So we were told to get 6 monthly hearing tests, but I realized that something was up. And so I ended up requesting to get more frequent ones. And we just kept finding that every single hearing test we went to for 2.5 years, he was down at the severe to profound in certain frequencies, and we could not do anything to budge it. And so that was our journey. And all I can say is thank goodness for Auslan, because he just thrived with that language. And we kept working on both languages as much as we could, but because he wasn't getting the access to the spoken modality, no matter what anyone did, he really struggled to acquire, and still struggles to acquire, speech and produce speech. But his Auslan is, oh man, I mean, if you follow me on socials, you know him and you know what he's capable of, and he's just thriving in so many ways. And I'm such an advocate for a bilingual approach for this reason, because we can't predict what's going to happen with our kids. You know, I was told straight off the bat when they found out he was moderately severe, he's a textbook case, hearing aids are going to be perfect for him. He's not going to have any issues. He won't need sign language. Yeah, got that one a lot. Even had a bit of a fight with a few specialists in the hospital, because I was amazed at how little education they had around language acquisition, but also how convincing they were and how forceful they were in regards to not signing to deaf children. And that was actually the catalyst, a lot of those experiences, for starting my own business, raising bilinguals, because I just saw such a gap in education and this lack of informed advice, and parents just walking around navigating a space with no clear-cut guidance. And it's a really scary thought that parents are having to be thrown into this world and not given the right information. And that for me was so evident when I went through it myself. And I just was like, wow, I'm so lucky that I already have the knowledge here, because I can't imagine what this would be like if you didn't have any knowledge. You know, for most of you, your baby is the first deaf child you've ever met. And or deaf person rather. And that's pretty full on. So I think, I think that was what really shocked me in those early days with Frankie. And also something that I didn't know when I was a teacher for deaf, I just was not aware of this journey until I went through it. And I think that's what I always come back to is with professionals and colleagues I speak to now, is that I need them to understand that a lot of what they believe is happening in this space is not what's actually happening in this space. And that is, again, why this podcast is so important to me, because I really want to amplify those experiences and start to raise awareness around this lack of informed information out there, and just advice and guidance, because it's a scary thought of how much out there is just misleading for families. But look, long story short, after Frankie, we went through, 2.5 years of this fluid. His most recent test, and this was it is 1st of October now, 2024. So this was in August, early August. We went and had another hearing test, one of many, and we found out that his hearing levels had actually reduced permanently. So they were no longer a conductive overlay. It was a sensory neural severe to profound hearing loss. And we still don't know why that is. We're waiting to get genetics, because we were in COVID crisis when we had our deaf baby, and things were just wild, and getting testing was wild. And I just was not in the headspace to do all the testing. So we're getting genetics done at the moment. But long story short, after a lot of really hard conversations and hours and hours and hours of research and just thinking, going back and forth and talking to everyone and wondering what we wanted to do, we looked at our little boy and thought, what does he want? What does he need? And we asked him, and we talked to him about the options for him, and that, you know, his levels were at a point where the hearing aids, no matter how powerful, weren't going to provide him with access to speech at the level in which he needed to produce speech and to understand and to just have access to the hearing world. And so for me, if he wanted to turn around and take his devices off and just sign for the rest of his life, I would be more than happy with that, because that's his choice. And he's got such rich language in Auslan that I know that he would be fine if that was his option and that was his, his pathway. And he could still go that way. And that's something I always try to tell parents, is that this is just not a linear journey at all. Not a linear journey. It's up and down. It pivots constantly. We have to pivot constantly as parents and just really, get in tune with our kids and what they want and what they're trying to communicate with us around their deafness and their identity and the way they want to have that relationship with their devices and what that looks like. And so we did a lot of that with Frankie, and we finally came to the collective decision that he was going to receive a cochlear implant on one side. And that was wild. Again, another part of the process, another part of the journey that I thought I knew. I'd counseled so many families through this process. I talked to so many families about this process, but then it happened to us. And all of a sudden, it wasn't that simple. And man, did I feel some emotions leading up to surgery and just all of the things that came with it. And I cried a lot, I would say, cried a lot. Went back and forth a lot. Am I doing the right thing? Asked myself that question about 1,000 times a day. Kept asking him, and he kept telling me he wanted it. And knowing my boy and just how much he wants to connect with the world around him, and just particularly, his hearing family and hearing peers, I knew that this was the decision that he wanted to make and we were going to support. And so we did it. And the surgery was insane. It was implantation recovery with that surgery was not fun, but our little kids are so resilient, and within 12 hours he was up running around. And now it's been about 2 months post implant, probably a little less, 1.5 months post implant, and he is thriving. He still gets to choose when he wears it, when he doesn't, but he's been pretty happy with it. And we're just seeing this new confidence in him that I didn't think he could get any more confident. I'm serious. Like, he is the boss. But I am just so proud of him. Like, I'm so proud of him and how much he just has taken so much of what's happened to him in his stride. Like, he's been in hospital so much. And it's just, he is just the happiest, most beautiful, smartest little kid. And we just are an absolute awe of him every day. And it's been really wonderful since having him to create this initiative, create this business that's now been running for almost 2 years, which is really exciting. Raising Bilinguals, which is my business, my passion project. And it really has become, as cliche as it sounds, my life purpose, my life's work, because I just see such a clear trajectory here for where I am heading and what I want to get out of this business and my philosophy and my mission. And it is just to shift the narrative for our kids. Frank is a perfect example of a little deaf kid who's ready to receive language, and he receives that language, and now he is thriving. And this is the biggest thing I always say, and this is literally the core of what I do, is I want to end language deprivation in our deaf and hard of hearing kids. And that starts with building a rich language foundation from as early as possible. Modality doesn't matter. It's all about language. It's all about just throwing everything at our kids. And that is what I really believe to be true. And it's just so embedded in the research. and everything I do, and all the evidence anecdotally that I have from my career, that I'm so passionate about that, and sharing that with families so that they feel empowered and know that they can do that as well. So just so excited about what's ahead. And this podcast has been such a long time coming, but something that I'm feeling really, really excited about and nervous. I mean, yeah, also nervous, but mostly excited. And I've already got my guest for next episode, who I just know you are going to love, because she is just an absolute legend and has been through what we would say in Australia, the ringer. And she's she's one of my biggest inspirations, and just how she holds herself and works through all this, you know, life, so to speak, that just seems to throw curveball after curveball. So I'm really excited about that episode. But I really, really hope that you loved this first episode, and gain some insight from my story, and now have a better understanding of who I am, what I stand for, and I guess my background and my role in all of this. And I'm really looking forward to our next episode. If you want to stay up to date with episode releases and any other information happening with the podcast, please make sure to subscribe, and keep following along, and share away if you like this episode. I really would love to gain some momentum and start to raise awareness and shift the narrative for our brilliant kids. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk soon.